This will be a tour roughly how I would give it to new members of staff at the cathedral. And we often start off here, the site of Old Minster, because it's very important to understand that the cathedral's history didn't start with the building of the Norman building, but belonged to the Saxon period. 650, we began construction on the Old Minster. It wasn't called that at the time. Now we look at it and we just see the outlines of the building. It was a building that took 400 years to develop, and by the end of it, it was a building of immense grandeur by Saxon standards. You have to remember that people were living in huts, and to have a stone building of this size, where the proud boast was people could actually get lost in it. It was amazing. And it belonged to a complex of buildings that showed what an important ecclesiastical centre Winchester was. But we mustn't forget that this was the site of Winchester's first cathedral. We've just moved south to this barely legible tablet, which tells us that this was the most westerly extent of the cathedral's nave. The length of a cathedral was terribly important. It was in competition with other buildings across Europe. And the fact that it was built so long eventually was about the power that the Normans wanted to demonstrate to the world, and about the prestige that they wanted to demonstrate to the church. If you look at the west front now, it's not a particularly grand end to the nave. The old one would have looked much more like a Norman construction. This one's an early English construction. And it's a shame that we've lost those two bays that would have come out further, but the archaeology is very close to the surface here, so we have to be very careful if we were ever to redevelop this area as a place of welcome. It's possible to overlook, as you come into this cathedral, the west window, which once upon a time was filled with saints and apostles and angels, all in serried ranks, with Christ in the middle, representing the power and splendor of heaven reflected in earth in the church's hierarchy. Now, after the Civil War in the 17th century, what we have is a higgledy-piggledy mosaic of glass, which some people see as a beautiful symbol of the fact that even broken things can be glorious, even broken people can be glorious. So that's a modern interpretation. But it's the history we live with, that this building was once destroyed by parliamentarian forces. And the other great point of wounding of this building was the Reformation in the 16th century. The view that people get when they come into the cathedral is spectacular. It's easy to forget that the nave is probably the least important part of this building. It wasn't built when they opened the cathedral. The cathedral stopped at the arms of the cathedral, the transepts. And this was built afterwards. It's obviously a processional space. It's where really important, the royalty, the nobles would have come through those doors in order to come down the full length of the cathedral. People tend to walk around the outside of the building when they're tourists, but the important people in worship, the occasions of state, to come right down the middle, as we still do today. And the message that this nave gives is that there's a journey to be made from the west end, the place which joins, as it were, the secular life, into the depths and the heart of the cathedral, into the place where the monks prayed, the inner sanctum, which is really the praying heart of the building. Now, there are banners along the cathedral, the length of the cathedral, which are placed on brackets, which we believe were put in for the marriage of Philip and Mary back in the Middle Ages. And at the moment, we've got on these brackets the Winchester Bible, different views, different perspectives on the Winchester Bible, some about the writing, some about the illuminations, so some showing just the gilding. And it's our attempt to let people know that in this building is one of the most important books of the 12th century, funded, we believe, by Bishop Henry of Blois, a very rich bishop of Winchester. Jane Austen, a woman important in Winchester, such a wonderful counterbalance, a woman with this amazing powers of observation, social critique, ready wit, and many people come to pay her respects at this place of memorial. Her career as an author is not represented on her ledger stone. It's represented here on this plaque, and then there's further memorialization above. But it's just very difficult to capture her unique spirit, and we're very privileged to have her lodging with us as her resting place. She looked forward to a heavenly mansion far more glorious than this, and we have no doubt that she has a place there. This is one of our greatest treasures, perhaps the second treasure after the Winchester Bible, also given to us by Bishop Henry of Blois. It's an amazing Tournai marble font from the 12th century. There are many of them around, but this one has some really exceptional features. Here we have perhaps the most famous panel of St. Nicholas, who became our Father Christmas all those years later, giving a dowry to the father of 3 unmarriable daughters. They had no money, they had no dowry, so they suddenly became extremely eligible. And marriage, as in Jane Austen's time, was a way of escaping poverty and destitution. So what you see here at the end is a very splendid gentleman with a falcon, ready to take an interest in these young women once they become marriable with a dowry. This font was used just last week in our main Sunday service to baptize a new member of our community. And we're going to extraordinary lengths to make this font usable once again, because water is very bad for the stone. We've spent ages putting in a porous base for the font. The Works Department have done a splendid job with that, restoring the font as best we can, or conserving it, so that people can come into that long line of baptisms at this place in this very font, and be part of the history of this place as well as a part of God's family. This chantry chapel, which is in the nave, we're in the opposite side in the aisle at the moment, was a place where people could pray for the soul of one of the most important bishops of Winchester, William Wykeham. He also founded Winchester College. It's here because when William Wykeham was a boy, he used to watch the Mass being performed against that wall. There would have been an altar there. So when he came to think about his place of rest, he wanted it to be on the spot where he had watched Mass said when he was just a lad. The Epiphany Chapel wasn't originally a chapel at all, but it was made into a chapel at the beginning of the 20th century, and it's one of the main places that people can come to pray because it's on the flat and everybody can get in here. It's got some very remarkable pieces of art in it, amongst which are the Burne-Jones windows up here. The designs for the windows aren't original, but they were reused in this chapel, and they have the William Morris acanthus leaf design all around it. I love it that their art is so theological, and what you have is an illustration of the captions at the bottom of each window. It says, "When thy word goeth forth, it giveth light and understanding unto the simple." People think that the crypt is where the bodies are buried. In fact, what a crypt is a way of building up the east end of the cathedral so that pilgrims can go up to the Holy Hill as they would have done in Jerusalem. It's an architectural feature, first and foremost. That being said, there are one or two small burials in the crypt of bones that we've discovered in the course of our archaeological excavations. And most importantly, at the far end of the crypt, there is a well, a sacred well, from which we think water was drawn to use in services. In the Old Minster, there were also wells under the altar, so we know it's not exactly an accident. The north transept, the north arm of the cathedral, is the place where we get a very strong sense of the original architecture of the building, with its 3 stories and rounded arches. This takes us right back into Romanesque times. It's a part of the cathedral which escaped modernization, if you like. And this is a place which reminds us that the arts are a very important part of the cathedral's life. We have had lunchtime concerts in here. We have had plays performed in here. And it's just a very lovely space. This is quite an important chapel, not only because we discovered in the 1960s that there was a wall painting hidden behind another one 100 years later. So it's a 13th century wall painting was put on top of a 12th century wall painting, and the 13th put at the other end of the chapel eventually. But in this chapel we see Jews depicted with their characteristic yellow hats, which of course eventually got changed into yellow badges as the persecution of Jews began in the 20th century. It's a salutary reminder of the persecution of the Jewish people and the crucial part played by Jews in the story. Jesus, of course, was Jewish, and he was taken down from the cross by Joseph of Arimathea, who's represented in this deposition of Christ from the cross. So it's a good space to contemplate interfaith relationships as well as core events in the life of our Saviour. You may not realize at first the connection between the tiles and the mortuary chests that are up on these screens. The tiles are there, and these are relatively modern reproductions, because there was a royal carpet leading to the high shrine that was put there in the 15th century at the far end of the cathedral. And these mortuary chests were put in because they were under the protection of St. Swithin, whose shrine it was. So there's an intimate relationship between St. Swithin and the different places he was in this cathedral, and the bones of other people who wanted to benefit from his protection. These we now know are definitely the bones of monarchs from the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, and beyond, and bishops too. And we've done 13 years of research to help us understand the relationships and identities of these bones. And we've got some of the way, and we hope to have many more people coming to hear the story, the Anglo-Saxon, the Danish dynasty, and the Norman one following it. The presbytery of the cathedral is near the high altar, and the high altar is very much the focus of what goes on here. We have this amazing screen behind it, which is filled by late Victorian statues, which were put into the niches that were robbed when the medieval statuary was taken out following the Reformation. The medieval statuary is a lot more expressive, and we've got some of that in our exhibition. The people here tend to look like very upright, rather boring people of state, men of state mostly. And we've got Queen Victoria tucked away. But one of the things I'd like to say about the screen is it's a marvelous experiment with light. You see the shaft of light coming in from the south side, going right across the screen. People who built these buildings thought about light an awful lot. And if you come here at the time when we say evensong on a Sunday, you'll see light streaming across the face of Jesus on the cross. It's a wonderful meditative focus for us all as we listen to music and pray together. Now we really are in the heart of the building. This is the place where the monks would come to say their sevenfold daily office. And so it's a space for gathering and a space for contemplation. And what I love about this part of the cathedral is that the architecture shrinks down to a human scale. And here you have seats so that, in the offices, which were quite long, there could be moments to sit down and get the weight off one's feet. But the monks also had a little way of helping themselves with that while they were standing up. These are called misericords, and they are ledges where you can perch while you're saying the office standing up and yet still take the weight off your feet. And they're often very beautifully decorated, such as the one that's here. Now, the important thing about the carving underneath these ledges is that you didn't want to make them too sacred, because after all, they were places where you parked your behind. So often they're quite fun. You get people chasing animals or people sticking their tongue out. And this was part of the humour and imagination of these medieval carvers. You also have these wonderful carvings on the edges here of animals that they may have imagined, and the carvings that would have been underneath scenes from the Old and the New Testament. And the important thing to realise is that always the imagination was filling in the gaps where people didn't quite know the full depth and breadth of reality, as we still don't today. And all this was offered up in worship to God. This is called a lectern, and it's where we do our reading from. It's an eagle because St. John is often symbolised by an eagle. The idea is that the Word of God soars up and gives you a wonderful perspective on the world as we know it. I mentioned the great and the good earlier, and I just wanted to stop off here and talk about this small memorial plaque, which I remember taking through the committees where these planning permissions are given. This is for Bishop Michael Scott Joint, who was bishop when I started, and a very kind man who became a friend of mine. What I remember is that we spent a lot of time with this plaque making it legible, because it didn't quite read well. And Michael, in his will, left us some money, and we used it to gild the cross that's just above here. The Guardian Angels Chapel is one of the most important spaces, almost a secret space in the cathedral. It's got this amazing ceiling with the Guardian Angels on it, which helps us to remember the importance of safeguarding in the cathedral's life, the importance that children are protected and vulnerable adults also. And it's a very wonderful space to hear confessions and just to be still. If you can get up the stairs, it's probably even nicer and less busy and noisy than the Epiphany Chapel. This glass is called Heavenly Glass or Cerulean Glass by Justin Knowles. He was making this when he was dying. And it's a very serene piece, very hard to light in fact. But I think it does very well in this spot, which was obviously filled before with some statue or other. The Lady Chapel of this cathedral as it stands now was the bit that was added on later as the cathedral crept eastward. We've got a very historic boss up there on the ceiling of Mary, the Queen of Heaven, which is a pre-Reformation construct, an idea which escaped the ravages of the Reformation. And we have a very, very sentimental reredos behind the altar of, again, the Virgin hearing the good news of the birth of Jesus. It shows you that in a cathedral, not everything is done in the best possible taste. There's room for the very sentimental, chocolate boxy images, as well as some of the high art that we have in the rest of the building. As the cult of the Virgin Mary developed, more and more stories were told about her piety and the miracles that she wrought. And these are represented underneath these panels The wall paintings behind it, they were painted in about 1500 and they've nearly been lost. But an art historian attempted to reconstruct what he thought would be the originals on these panels. So they are the legends of the Virgin Mary. Chantry chapels, chapels which are built to pray for the souls of the dead, are a distinguishing feature of Winchester Cathedral. And many people now don't have an idea that when you die, you need extra prayers to avoid being judged badly or to purify your soul on the way to heaven. On the other hand, I like to think of the charity of the monks who would pray for people who were dead. What can praying for the dead get you in social terms? It can't. It's just an act of love. So when we come to chantry chapels, I do like to think of the fact that these people were prayed for even after death because they were loved, and the monks who prayed for them believed that these people were loved. It's a pity we can't step on these tiles at present. After 800 years, they've really reached the end of their natural life, and we're thinking very carefully about how best to conserve them, apart from strewing the place with tents of barriers. But you see behind it modern icons by Sergei Fyodorov, with St. Swithin and St. Birinus, and John the Baptist and Jesus, Virgin Mary and the archangels. A wonderful way of re-establishing devotion in this space. And we look forward to the time when we can use the tiles somehow or other and approach this area, which is also going to be the place on which 2 new mortuary chests are going to be built and placed, remembering individuals and relationships that we've discovered through this really exciting scientific project over the last 13 years. With Jane Austen, William Walker is one of the 2 great heroes of the recent history of the cathedral. William Walker saved the cathedral with his own hands because he went down into the drifts that were cut around the cathedral and laid down concrete bags which stopped the water rising so that other workers could come and shore up the foundations which were cracking. He did great work over the period from 1905 to 1911, and he got given a Rose Bowl by the King for his troubles. Sadly, he died of Spanish flu sometime later. A very modest man, and a man who embodies the industry that keeps this cathedral up and standing now, safe from flood. We are, of course, in a garrison city and we want to engage with society, so a lot of our memorialisation is about our relationship with the armed forces. At the moment, I think we really do understand the need for national defence, but of course in the days of empire it wasn't just about defence. And we have to understand windows like this where there's an angel holding a rifle, giving it to a soldier, with the word patience underneath. It takes quite some empathy to understand how you can put a rifle and patience together. And these things do need to be reinterpreted for our own time, which is why we have this contested heritage question that's going to be with us for the conceivable future. This is the memorial to Bishop Samuel Wilberforce, otherwise known as Soapy Sam. And there's very little to say about this memorial other than the fact that most of us would dearly love it to be elsewhere, because he's not even buried here. He's just left this for his grateful supporters, and we could have this space as a much freer space, but nonetheless it provokes a lot of interest. He was the man who got involved in a debate with Huxley in Oxford about evolution, and legend has it that he was bettered by Huxley. In fact, he was quite a learned bishop who knew a lot about science and appreciated its validity. This is the St. Alphege Chapel, formerly known as the Venerable Chapel. This feels like a very, very familiar place because every day we pray here. We've been praying here in this chapel for a long, long time. And when you do that, it becomes a very familiar part of your inner landscape as well. Remember too, spending a lot of time replacing the furniture in here and making sure little details were right, such as the profile of this bench being at exactly the right height and the same contour, the same moulding as the stone memorial behind it. None of this furniture is standard issue. And then the Jerusalem limestone altar comes from a quarry owned by a Muslim in Jerusalem. And the candlesticks again, which were specially designed for this space. It's a lovely place to pray day by day, and sometimes we fill it and sometimes there are just a few of us. But it certainly feels like somewhere where life has been sanctified, life has been taken into God's life. St. Alphege was one of our exports to Canterbury. He was Bishop of Winchester and then he became Archbishop of Canterbury. But he was captured and ransomed by the Danes. And Alphege said, "I don't want the poor to be paying my ransom. I'm not that important." The Danes kept him, got really cross about it, and one day after a particularly good meal, they hammered him to death with ox jaw bones. And his successor said, well, he didn't die directly for his faith, he died for justice, to stop the poor from being exploited. So he became known as the martyr for justice. In his hand is the east end of Old Minster, which he also had built, the last phase of Old Minster's development before it was knocked down to make way for our nave. And this was made for us by a monk at Alton Abbey. Alton Abbey used to be an Anglican Benedictine community. Sadly, it's now shut, but this is a reminder of the link that we had with the monks. And this is the Canterbury Cross. The reason we have this here is that when Bishop Tim was consecrated in this building, we had the Archdeacon of Canterbury with us, and she brought this to us from Canterbury as a gift. So when we send pilgrims off to Canterbury on the Pilgrim's Way, we're able to show them a little slice of Canterbury and encourage them that in 9 to 14 days they will be in Canterbury worshipping at that cathedral. Study to be quiet. That was the motto of Isaac Walton, who was a great biographer and who had as his great passion fishing. Fishing, there he is fishing in the corner. This window given to us by American friends. And this chapel has been much restored. One of my predecessors put in these benches that were supposed to remind us of the riverside with these rivulets, quite interesting to sit on, quite challenging for a long service. And this amazing altar made out of a ton of English oak that was felled in a storm and had to be winched over the stone screen there, depicting some of the fish in the book The Complete Angler, which is regarded as the angler's Bible, and with the fishermen apostles on either side. So it definitely has a very fishy theme in this chapel, and we use it weekly. I'm standing at the back end of the pulpit. It's just a place to say a few words of conclusion, which is that though we might preach occasionally and give people biblical insights in a fairly direct way, this building itself preaches. It preaches of the grandeur of God. It preaches about human ambition and desire. It does all sorts of things, and I think it's important not to narrow things down and allow people's interest to take them through this building. Tell them funny stories if you can think of them. It helps to stay close to historical detail, which I might not have always done in this talk, but it is a way of making people feel at home in the house of God. And surely that's important, that the house of God shouldn't feel to be somewhere threatening, but somewhere enticing, interesting, worthy of curiosity, and in the end giving you a sense that there is something beyond the immediate. There is an eternal realm beyond the temporal, and that in all the materiality you can see a lot of glory beyond, things to sustain our spirits on our life's journey.